Hello, welcome everyone. Glad to see so many of you here. My name is Raman Frey. I'm your host. I'm a technology startup and advisor. And I'm also the founder of Good People Dinners, which is a Bay Area community built around meaningful conversations. In the United States today, women make up only 18% of science graduates. This percentage has seen a steady decline over the last several decades. Why is this percentage so low, and what can we do about it? Today, we'll be exploring this topic with our friend Valli Nachiappan. She's the Senior Director of Engineering at Zendesk. Not only does Valli lead a large team of software engineers at Zendesk, but she also started her career as a software engineer. So before we dive into our conversation, just a few words about our sponsor for this series, Lohika. Lohika helps high-growth tech startups engineer the next big thing. Lohika distributed engineering teams work with the most demanding technology clients in the world, including Okta, Twilio, and Airbnb, to help VPEs and CTOs accelerate their time to market. So let's get started. Valli, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing? Are you in the Bay Area right now?
Yes, Ramon. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the introduction. Yes, I'm in the Bay Area, specifically in Walnut Creek.
Nice. Well, let's begin sort of chronologically. In your early days, just take us back to college and the undergraduate degree that you received. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I originally came from India. So when I came here for my undergrad degree, I had very little family or very little extended family. All my friends, my parents, all of them were back in India. So I came here. I have a psychology degree from India, and I decided to switch into computer science because I always liked math, and sort of that was my default or fallback. Coming to college here, what kind of took me back was the numbers that you alluded to. There were just less number of female students in computer science or in math classes or in physics classes, actually, for that matter. That was quite surprising. I did not expect that. I thought there would be an even balance, and I that's what I had experienced back in India. There was no gender difference, at least at the time when I went to college, between science and art subjects. There were just as many men in both sides as well as females on both sides. So I think that was what I really remember about being very different.
Do you remember much about maybe so you had more gender parity in India where you had come from, and things seemed very skewed once you arrived here in the United States? When you arrived here, do you remember anything about your male classmates, how they perceived you, or the things that they might have said?
Yeah, I mean, it was quite funny because most of the breaks we got in between classes, they would sort of disappear. And once I did ask them, well, where do you guys go? And they were always like, well, there are so few women around in computer science or in math buildings. We went to business to try and meet more people, meet more diverse population there, I guess. So yeah, it wasn't just me who perceived that skewed imbalance. It was other people as well, and it was quite obvious. And what I found was the farther you went along in your course during that computer science degree, there were more dropouts, and the dropouts were mostly from the female side. What started out as an anemic population toward the end got even worse.
And do you think that sort of the professors had anything to do with this? I mean, how did they perceive you, or what did they think about this phenomenon you're describing?
My professors also were, for the most part, male. I'm assuming male engineers or male science graduates. A lot of them were Indians. I don't know if their behavior was in any way promoting or perpetuating the cycle. I don't know the exact cause as to why people dropped. The subjects weren't easy, and there was no internet, and we sort of relied on each other for support. But again, there are lots of other subjects that I'm sure are very complicated and difficult and not a walk in the park, but women stick to it. So I'm not exactly sure why science, especially physics, math, and computer science might be any different than other subjects, which can be quite complex.
Well, you yourself were obviously sufficiently inspired not just to see your education all the way through, but to eventually have a wonderful, successful career in these areas. What inspired you to study computer science, and what allowed you to sort of stick to it? Because for anybody, it's going to be difficult at times.
Math, I started off as a math major. So math was something that came easier to me. I would have had a much harder time with history, actually, to be honest. And then I switched from math into computer science. What helped me stay the course? Well, there were a number of times when I just wanted to drop out. It was difficult. I did not have a very good support system. I had my husband here, but not a very extended family. So I cannot say that I always knew what I wanted to do. I knew for the most part I was going to make it, and I knew what I wanted to do, what would make me happy. But that didn't mean that I didn't doubt myself. I didn't fall so many times. It's just, you've got to stay the course. It's not pretty while you're in the course, while you're deep down in the nitty-gritty, down in the depths, but you've just got to keep hope, and you know that you're going to get a break. If you keep your skill set sharp, that at some point you will get that exposure, you will get that experience, you'll get your lucky break, and you will make it.
Okay, so you're 22-ish, I'm guessing, and you're leaving college, you have your degree in computer science, and you're looking at the corporate workforce, and you have these ambitions now. What did that job marketplace look like to you? What did the industry look like to you? How did you get started?
My dream was to work at a company in the US. I was going to make it. I was going to enter the corporate world, and I was going to be a success story. So I persevered through college. I thought that was the most difficult journey. Little did I know at that point that was just a start. I had a long way to go in order to make something of myself. I really wanted to enter the corporate world, but what I found at that time was that there was very little flexibility. I'm talking about 20 years ago. So
yeah.
The concept of working from home, even occasionally, the concept of coming in late at 9 o'clock to work, the concept of leaving at 4 to go pick up your kids, or taking your kids to the doctor, all of this was just almost non-existent. And I did not have the courage at that point to actually enter the corporate world and put what I had, the very little I had, at risk. We have 2 kids, and they were very little at that point in time. I didn't think I was going to do justice to my job or to my family, and so I took a different route. I decided to teach computer science to high school students and pre-college students. So that was sort of how I.
So you're teaching these kids how to code. You're just a few years older than them, and obviously you're giving them valuable skills if they want to enter this particular field. But can you say a little bit about what you learned from them? Because obviously after this, you did transition to a corporate route.
Yes. I learned a lot from them. I've got to thank them for a lot. So if I thought I was resilient, I really wasn't. So they were all male students, and I learned how to communicate effectively with a short amount of time before I lost their attention. I also learned that society teaches us things very early on in life, that we pick up a lot of the cues. When I observed how they behaved in other classes that were taught by male instructors, they behaved very differently from the chaos that happened in my class. At that point, I realized they were just trying to give me a hard time, so I would disappear. I wouldn't come back, right? But I was determined that I was going to make it through the job. I was going to learn, get something out of it, and I was going to make sure that they learned something out of it. And so what I decided was, if I could gain their respect and gain their trust, that would be it. That would be the ground zero. That would be will bring me up from negative to just a neutral point. And from then on, I can start teaching them. Right now, I wasn't teaching them. I was just trying to battle with them to see if I could gain their trust, and actually they would understand that I knew what I was talking about, and learn to respect me.
Yeah.
So that was a strategy.
It's interesting when you say that, because it just makes me think that there's a presumption of credibility that does sometimes fall along gender lines. And so do you think that, so you move on from this, you go out looking for that first job, and you're up for a position. Actually, you said with when we were speaking before, you said with two young men who you had gone through that computer science degree with. Is that correct? What happened there? Did you feel that you had to prove yourself more than the two of them?
Right. So I knew these two other people who had fairly similar backgrounds, just like I did, and we were all competing for the same job. We went to the same interviews, and before going to these interviews, we kind of prepared together. So we would exchange notes, kind of on the same footing. However, they were all American. They were men. Really nice people, though. I still keep in touch with them. And what happened was I went through the first couple of rounds of interviews, and then I was put on hold to say that they've got other candidates that they're going to talk to. Fair enough. And one of these people that we all trained with, one of them went all the way through, and he got the job. The other person, a little bit later, was approached by the same company, and he got a different job. So that just left me with no job. And that got me thinking. Initially, I was really annoyed and angry, and I assumed the worst, that, that they are the in crowd. I obviously didn't belong here. I was a Asian female, colored. I'm about 5 feet tall, so I definitely don't look any part. And this is a male-dominated game, and that's just the truth. When I got thinking, I realized that the exposure and the experience that is given to men is not the same. It's not. Women don't get that exposure. Women don't get that experience. As a result, you have nothing to draw from. I mean, you need.
It's a catch-22, is what you're saying. In other words, you need the experience to get the job. You need the job to get the experience. That's right.
Exactly. So you're trying to get the job, but you don't have experience to fall back on, and so you come out saying that you're green in so many words, whereas men get that experience, and there's a lot more trust. There's a trust that, men can lead teams a bit more or a bit better. Men can talk to stakeholders a bit better than a woman can. So if the lady doesn't deal with it well, you're told you need to build your self-confidence. If the male member doesn't do it well, it's you need to work on your natural abilities to work with people, right? So the feedback is given in a very subjective, critical way that it falls along gender and gender bias.
Yeah, something of a double standard there. So eventually you overcame this initial difficulty, and you got hired in your first job as an engineer. And you shared that at this entry level of building software, you felt it was somewhat merit-based. But then you faced a new level of resistance when you were interviewing for director positions. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How did you move into management? What were some of the experiences you had there?
You're absolutely right. So there's a lot of demand for entry-level engineers, right? There's a lot of work available. So if you have decent skill set, you're a good team player, I'm assuming if you knock on enough doors, if you try hard enough, you will find that job. Where I really started seeing hurdles along my path was as I wanted to progress into management and move through my career. And this particular job, going from a team lead to a manager is a jump, but going from a manager to a director, I found it really difficult. And I don't know if it's just me or just women in general, as you get higher up, find this jump fairly daunting. And that's because at that point, there is a great supply of talent. You have a number of managers who are all high potential people who are all vying for the same job, and less number. Obviously, as you go higher up the chain, you need less and less people. You only need one CTO, and you may need a handful of VPs, etc. So you have high potential, a lot of talent, people with a lot of experience, all vying for the same job. Now, if you don't have as much experience, or if you don't have as much mentorship, even though you have raw talent, it doesn't exactly reflect well when you go into these interviews. And so And for those reasons, and maybe more, also there is that, now we know that we're all hardwired, and there is a high probability that we end up being biased. So is this person who's sitting in front of you that you know for a few minutes, are they very similar to you, in which case they're in the in group, or they're quite dissimilar and they're in the out group? And if you look at leadership here in America, I would say it's still a very homogenous group. If you're interviewing panels, they're also fairly homogenous.
I've heard people jokingly call them manels.
I mean, it's a problem that has been created somewhat, and we perpetuate it, right? At least now, I think the good thing is everyone is aware that this is a problem. I think initially it was just thought of as female engineers aren't up for it. You're good worker bees, but may not be good managers. You know, but now I know that
it's everywhere. I mean, I don't know if I've mentioned it to you, but my friend Adam Smiley Poswalski is part of this speaker circuit, mostly with technology companies. He's written several books, and he was so outraged at the sort of, and he's a white male Jewish guy. He was so outraged by the homogeneity of those panels you're describing that he has made it a major part of his career to ensure that that the women he knows who are talented speakers are being paid at parity with him, and he refuses to be on any panels unless it's sufficiently diverse. So there are people like that, and I think we're going to get into that a little bit in the Q&A, and I think that's what it takes. I think one of the things you were just saying also deserves highlighting, in the sense that we all carry biases. That's behavioral science 101. Everybody carries biases. I think it's pretty irrefutable. And so the solution involves both becoming aware of our biases, that we tend to favor people who are similar to us. And then also, one of the things you just said was really coalescing solidarity around candidates who are very deserving and who may not be like us. Which is sort of a strategy that I see popping up in a variety. I know this happens at, for instance, Asana and other places. But getting back to the questions here. So the higher you go, the harder it gets. That was actually a quote I pulled from our earlier conversation. You said that. What are some other sort of strategies for transcending homogeneity and building a truly diverse workforce? And then also, what are some of the sort of implicit advantages of having more diversity, especially in management?
I think now companies are collecting data. So if you look at Zendesk, and I work for Zendesk, I'm proud to say that we take this really seriously. We're looking at numbers closely. We know that there is a problem. And I think that's the first step, is to establish a baseline, to know these are the numbers, these are the hard numbers. You may not like it, you have very little diversity. And as you get higher up, so for example, if you're looking at software engineering level, the diversity may not be as bad. But if you look at senior engineers, you can see a sharp decline in the number of women or in the number of diverse people, right? It starts getting homogenous. And then you go into staff engineer, you go into architects. Now, you're really talking almost all white male. I'm not saying it's absolute, but I'm saying the numbers are pretty poor. And so there is a lot of training and coaching that goes along, not just in terms of internal candidates, but as well as training and coaching given to interviewers, and to make sure that the panel is not being blinded or is not one-sided. It's a fairly diverse panel, and we talk about this in debriefs. And we've got processes, meaning for every open role that you've got, make sure that there is a healthy pipeline of diverse candidates, that in your final round, make sure you have a diverse candidate. Wait till you find these diverse candidates. Geographically, now we know with COVID, we've all worked remotely and it's worked fairly well. So increase your geographical area to look for these diverse candidates. It doesn't have to be in San Francisco. So there are a number of steps that we've taken in order to make sure that we are looking for diversity. Once you hire people, how do you promote, and how do you retain people, and how do you diversify that pool, and how do you make sure that everyone gets these opportunities? How do you build an inclusive culture? So it's a lot of training and coaching and This is given to everyone in the company, whether you're interviewing people or you're not interviewing people, just to have that healthy culture. So I think taking time to, one, acknowledge that there is a bias, acknowledge that there is a diversity issue, and start collecting data and acting on that data. And I think these are some of the ways where we can actually balance things.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up data, because that's also, I think, a very interesting strategy for overcoming sort of a variety of different forms of unconscious bias, whether it's ethnic or around gender or things like that. And there's some very interesting pieces of software that actually I'm not familiar with, and maybe you are, that kind of deliberately create sort of blindness to things like gender and ethnicity and stuff like that. Can you maybe share just a little bit about sort of the role of data in understanding and addressing diversity hiring? And is there perhaps some software that you might recommend to people who are listening right now? And how does that software work? Can you say a bit about that?
So I'm afraid there's no perfect software. What software helps us do is tell us where there's a greater pool of candidates available. As to how diverse that pool is, I'm not sure if the software can point that out. But we get, initially, the excuse is we can't find enough engineers. And now you're making it harder by saying you have to have diverse engineers. So this software could solve the first part of the problem by saying, if you're looking somewhere around Madison, so that's where one of our teams are, I don't have to find engineers in Madison, but in the Chicago area, if I can find engineers around there, and if they could be potentially diverse candidates, then that's probably worth building a complete remote team in that area so that people are in the same time zone. So you want to set teams up for success. So you don't, you don't want to go from 0 to 60 in no time at all, where you're hiring all over the place and then the team falters because of just the difficulty of working across time zones. So one of the things that we did was, if we want to hire people closer to Madison, we can find engineers in and around that area, a diverse pool of engineers who will all work remotely, but at the same, within the same time zone. So that gives them a better chance of success. These people will all be remote, and and we can go after. You have very good colleges there, so you can probably hire a very diverse set of engineers for these teams.
So let's narrow in a little bit on sort of specifics for somebody, say, who's listening right now, who's in leadership or management. Is there anything that you would recommend that they could do differently, specifically to support female software engineers in realizing their full potential and in sort of diminishing, you've talked to them about sort of this problem of attrition, right? That there's like a feedback loop. You have very few female engineers, and then you lose them. So what are some things in sort of coaching and mentorship that management and leaders could do to support female software engineers who are already hired?
Yes, very good question. It is really important. I think that coaching and mentorship become very important. Have one-on-one conversations. Make sure you provide feedback, consistent feedback, and constructive feedback. A lot of the times the feedback, again, our bias sometimes plays a huge role in the feedback that we give, the words that we use in the feedback. There was a tradition till about recently where there was this practice of giving feedback at the end of the year. The whole year might go by, or half the year goes by, and then you give subjective critical feedback, but a lot of time has been spent. You could have given feedback consistently on your one-on-ones. Every one-on-one, provide feedback as to what the female engineer or the diverse engineer or just any engineer may not be doing exactly right, or may not be helping themselves or helping their team. And so provide consistent feedback. When you find them faltering, the managers are supposed to be the safety net. You don't want to stand back and watch them fail and then let them know that they failed. Well, at that point, they themselves know that they failed. So you're their safety net. You don't need to meddle every time, but you're supposed to, in the background, say, maybe you could try this a little differently. Maybe you could say this a bit differently. Maybe you could meet with stakeholders more frequently, so that time, you don't lose time. Or you could, whatever the feedback would be, I would say, coaching, mentorship, feedback, all of those are really important pillars in order to help individuals grow.
That's beautiful.
It's even more important for female engineers because of the experiences we've gone through. I don't know, in my case, my level of self-confidence, I wouldn't say was terribly high when I came out of college into that high school, and then got probably pounded and then built it up higher. So it goes up and down, and it really helps when you have a really good manager, or when you have, even if you're not a manager, if you're a peer and you could still give valuable feedback, you would really help that person out. And, you know, I remember my peers who helped me out, and I am eternally grateful.
Would you say that we just in general have a tendency to over critique rather than support? I mean, you talked about a safety net. You know, it takes actually, I think, a fair bit of skill to create a management culture that says your success is our success, and as if an error arises or a misjudgment arises on your part, it is my responsibility not just to correct but to encourage and to educate. I mean, I find that unfortunately to be and maybe that's improving, but it's often been an issue where you'll have management just say, I'm just gonna tell you everything you've done wrong constantly, and the person ends up discouraged. Can you speak a little bit about that role of nurturing and support and encouragement, and that pivoting that can happen when a person feels truly supported by their peers and their managers?
You know, when you're nervous, you end up making more mistakes. When you know someone's watching over your shoulders, without, if you feel comfortable, if you know they're watching over it to kind of be your safety net, that's different. But if you know they're watching over, waiting for you to make a mistake, you end up like everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and you handle everything even worse. I've been in that position. Maybe that's not what they're doing, but when you're nervous already, that puts you even more uncomfortable. That just sets you off on the wrong footing. So I think that one-on-one relationship with the manager is extremely important. The manager goes a long way in helping the person really develop, blossom, be comfortable in their shoes, and then grow. I think all of us have a potential. We just need a chance to actually blossom, to be confident, to know that we're not going to be punished for every wrong move that we make. Because if I don't make a mistake, I don't think I'm going to improve that much. You've got to allow the person to fail fast, but then be there to provide positive, not even positive, actionable feedback, right? Even if it's negative, actually, that's really important feedback. Don't hide the negative feedback. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I've had people not give me any feedback, which is even worse. Like, you could have told me this. It doesn't
you were
matter.
making a mistake or something like that.
Exactly. If I got stopped when I was making a small mistake, my blast radius would have been a lot less, and we could have corrected that mistake fairly quickly. Instead, you just sat back, you felt a bit queasy about not giving your female engineer any feedback. That then I didn't know any better, and I made that mistake many times over, and now the blast radius is a lot wider, the greater damage being done. So I think feedback is really important, and especially negative feedback. It should be actionable. It should be, timing is everything. Give it the right time. Give it bite size. You don't have to overwhelm the person and tell them, you're hopeless. That's not very helpful.
It doesn't motivate people very well, does it?
Right. And already we're a bit on shaky ground. So actionable, bite size, consistent, constant feedback is really is very important.
All right, we're going to wrap up in just a few minutes and switch to Q&A here. But maybe you could just say a little bit. I mean, this series is sponsored by Lohika, and obviously there's some collaboration there. I'm assuming you've managed to implement a variety of different practices to create a strong gender diversity and other forms of diversity on your own team. When you are collaborating with Lohika, when Lohika engineers are working with you, is there anything that you do in that collaboration also to try to ensure some degree of diversity?
Lohika brings to us a diverse set of people, right? For the most part, my teams are all in North America. Lohika is out of the country. That brings a greater diversity in terms of talent, diversity. I think now the diversity is in terms of gender as well. But I think the more diverse you are, the stronger your teams become. That distance or that time difference doesn't matter. If you have good skill set and if you promote diversity, I think the rest of it will fall in place. And I think we should give it a chance and really harness that potential.
Thank you. All right, so last question before Q&A. It's say 2 years from now or 5 years from now, somewhere in that time frame, and you have waved a magic wand, which is massively helpful and corrective of all the issues we've discussed today. What has changed, and what is it like to work in this industry 2 to 5 years from now, when all of that positive change has already occurred?
What is it like to work with all of these positive changes? We're assuming everything is going to happen, and it's going to happen to plan.
The best. I'm asking about, like, you have the magic wand, and it's the best case scenario, and all of these things have been remedied as much as they can. There's been rapid positive change.
I think if there was one thing I could use my magic wand, it would be that initial supply chain, right? I would somehow attract more female engineers to enter this career, to take up these professions, to enter college and actually take math, science, computer science courses and become computer science graduates or any science graduate and start taking up these careers. I would like to see a very healthy pipeline coming in, because I think part of the problem is that pipeline is so anemic to begin with that any disruption in that flow ends up hurting all of us for a long time. But if we have a consistent flow, even if things go wrong or people take time off, or you have other family things and you decide to do something different with your career and then you come back, if we have a healthy flow, we'll be able to ride that wave and we'll be able to even things out. Currently, we're not. We're already start out in the negative, and we only get worse.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, brings us back to the beginning of our conversation, thinking about those college students and encouraging those college students. Well, let's transition now to Q&A from the audience. I have a whole bunch of questions which are teed up here, both questions that were submitted before today's conversation and questions that have been submitted while we were chatting. We'll start with one from Luciana, who asks, any supportive messages that you have for a woman in her mid-30s who are only now being able to focus on career?
Hi, Luciana. It doesn't matter whether you're in your 30s or 20s, right? I don't think age matters, in my opinion. I think it's the effort, it's the mindset, it's the resilience that really matters. Understand that it's going to take time. It's not going to fall in place immediately. Have a good support system, meaning either you have mentors, you have people you can lean on, people you can practice with, people you can use as sounding boards to figure out which course or what the right direction or what good options are there. Also leverage your network. That was one thing I did not pay attention to, and I regret it. Use your network. A lot of times people will point you in the right direction. Hey, my company is looking for someone with this skill set. And sometimes it doesn't apply to you, but just go for the heck of it. Take up more interviews. They're all practice rounds. All of these things help for that final interview, which you might get. And I say you utilize every opportunity.
Well, you remind me in that comment, one of the things that I've seen done remarkably effectively, especially for somebody who has taken time to start family, which Luciana did, is not only doing everything you just said, which is excellent advice, but then helping the people around you. I think by taking a really magnanimous attitude and pointing people at job opportunities that are perfect for them, by constantly giving in that way, a lot more opportunities start to come back at you through your network. But it does take a lot of time. This is a good, I think, transition to a question from Kelly, who asks specifically about you. Who were your mentors, and what moments do you feel were key in your personal professional development?
Thank you for asking that question. Yes, mentors are really important and hard to come by. Good ones are hard to come by. Surprisingly, all my mentors were actually men. I did not have female mentors. It's probably because there were fewer of us around. Sandeep Mishra was someone that I started my career early with, and he was someone who opened my eyes to pay differences for gender. I did not even realize that women were paid differently from men. And Sandeep was the one who told me about it and who encouraged me to find other jobs where I'd be better paid compared to him. He was my counterpart, although a senior counterpart. I think they become a very important source in your life. There's another person who gave me that break, who actually realized the potential I had. His name is David Wise, and he was a president at Yapstone, and he gave me that position, that title, to be the director of engineering. My current manager, Jason Smale, who's extremely remarkable, who helps me, who points me in the right direction. And that's really important. Sometimes you have blind sides. Sometimes you're not aware of your some of your strengths or some of your weaknesses. And it's good when you get that feedback, again, bite-sized, constructive, with every intention of trying to help you. I think what's really important is having sounding boards, having equal partners who you value and who you can engage with. And one such person is Nishant. I work with him. He's my peer. I respect him. I push back. He pushes back. And that's a really healthy balance to have. Someone who's not going to fold and take everything. And it's a very good combination. So I would say that is really important, that you find mentors, you find coaches, you find peers who can support you, but at the same time who will offer a counter perspective, a counterbalance that will open your eyes.
It makes all the difference in the world when you can feel that mutual respect. So yeah, we're all lucky when we find people like that. Here's a question from Jonathan. He says, I'm a man leading a team of predominantly female developers. How can I be a better ally and empower my team to achieve their potential?
Lucky man, we're all trying to do that. You can be a better ally. You're obviously a better ally if you've already got female engineers, Jonathan, who report to you or you're leading them. I think it is, in my opinion, it is, whether you have female engineers or male engineers you're trying to lead, they're all engineers, end of the day. Hand on the pulse is what I always say. Every person is slightly different. And it may not, the difference may not.
Can you repeat that? Did you say hand on the pause? What is
hand on the pulse? Sorry.
Oh, pulse. Okay, sorry. I didn't understand. Okay.
No, that means very different. Hand on the pulse. Engineers are different people. And so having that one-on-one conversation, understanding where their natural strengths are, finding out areas where they can develop and progress, and pointing them in the right direction. You, as a manager, have that unique perspective of that person. You're interacting with them, but you have their best intention at heart and mind, and you want to point them in the right direction. You're also a person who they think and who they will respect and sort of take your words seriously, right? So you can really have a positive impact when you point them in the right direction. That is a good responsibility. It's also a responsibility. So, I would say during your one-on-ones, I always prepare or make some notes when I go in, so that I use that 30 minutes or whatever time it is that you have to the best of your ability to help them advance their potential.
Thank you. Yeah, the next question kind of speaks to your magic wand response, which was sort of those early, building that pipeline, those early interventions to encourage girls to take an interest in computer science. Kevin asks, how do we convince more girls to choose this path early in school and in college? and what should we point towards, or what would motivate more girls and give them the confidence to see this as a sort of career path for them?
I don't know why girls don't, actually, I should take back that response. Is this just an American thing, or is it worldwide? Because I thought, my assumption was, growing up in India, I didn't see this disparity. Maybe I was young and I wasn't looking nationally within India, but I don't know if this is an American thing, or if it's predominantly in the US. If it is, I don't know what the source is. Maybe, I don't know, I'm at a loss. That's why I said I would use my magic wand. I don't know what the real reason. I'm sure there is a reason, because if so many girls are choosing the same subjects to avoid, then maybe,
I mean, there's a lot of weight behind cultural and social expectations of what a person is supposed to do, and these are often, woven with things like gender and ethnicity. It was one of the questions we didn't get to in our main conversation. We didn't quite get to all of our questions, so I was going to ask you how the United States is doing, and what the United States might be able to do better, because this seems to be a thing we keep coming back to. There's another question also from Myra, asking about young women of color and encouraging them to pursue coursework in software engineering. There seems to be many sort of forces allied against that expectation. I think also of that, what was that movie about the African-American women who were part of NASA, who supported the Apollo program in mathematics. I mean, to my eye, you see it, believe it, right? What was do you remember that movie?
Yeah, I don't remember the name, but I do remember. I know exactly what you're talking about. The three women who were behind.
That's right.
All the calculations, but I don't remember the name.
Yeah, I'm going to resist Googling that right now, but it's a wonderful movie, and if you haven't seen it, you should definitely have a look. Everything about it's fantastic. So yes, other questions here about sort of mentors, and here's yet another question about from Vidya Lakshmi, asking about sort of this pause. And so maybe we could talk about this a bit more. She says she took a career break for 7 years to take care of her kids, and did her master's degree, and is working remotely as a developer. She has struggled to attend interviews, many rounds of interviews and everything like that. Do you have any specific advice for her? I do think this is something that unevenly falls on women in terms of caring for children, and these pauses from career can certainly have negative implications for gaining momentum in career again.
I agree with you. I know exactly what you're talking about. If you don't take a pause in your career, you slow it down to some extent. You can have your eyes on your family, as well as trying to have a competitive career going at the same time. So I definitely get that. Now that you have taken a pause, the one thing that I don't do is I don't regret. Like, for whatever reason, I decided to take a different route. That's what I did. I'm happy I did that. Now, getting back into the career, we just have to figure out how to get things back on track and get it working. I would say first thing is, obviously, you've done your master's. Keep that skill set really sharp. Understand what the market needs are. Understand what jobs that you're going after, and focus on those. As I mentioned, have mentors, anyone in the industry, in this domain space, who can help you out in any way, meaning either they can do sort of mock interviews, let you know what the market needs in terms of what the job needs are. In some cases, are you like a back-end focused engineer? Are you front-end? Are you more into architecture? Whatever the specialty that you're going in for, really sharpen on those skills. And I think these days, I would like to say with a bit more confidence that if your skill set is sharp, even with gender bias, all other bias, I certainly believe that you can actually break the mold and you can get the job.
There's a knock-on question here, which I when I'm consulting for startups, often when it's a very small company, it's right at the beginning. Often, rather than look for a full-time hire, it'll be like trial. They'll do little contract gigs with different people and give them real projects where even if they fail, it's a recoverable loss, but it's a sort of trial by fire. And if it works well, then they can become full-time employees. Can you say a little bit about, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about, for somebody who's trying to transition back in, should they accept short-term contract work or even suggest short-term contract work in order to get their feet wet again? Or is that not a good idea?
I still believe anything. I would take any chance, right? I believe in myself. So I think if I get that break of a short-time contract, why not? Because my belief is if they're going to spend time and train me to do some of their work and put my code in production on their production site, they're going to invest in me. I am not going to let them down. I'm going to excel at it, and I'm going to get them to extend my contract. Worst case, I didn't lose anything, right? I gained knowledge, and I will try. I'll keep trying at other companies. But most likely when people invest in you or companies invest in you, it's a bit of trouble unless you were so bad. They will cut ties, or unless that project didn't go well, in which case ties get cut as well. But if the project goes well, then they're already invested and they'll be like, okay, come on, let's get on board and here's your next project. There's no time to waste. Now we need to get this done faster because you know the system already.
Okay, maybe we have one more question. We'll make this one maybe the last question, and then we're going to transition to our breakout rooms where some of the questions that we didn't get to can be discussed in those breakout rooms. Valli will be in breakout room 1. I'll be in breakout room 2. It's our job to sort of facilitate those conversations. So, all right, I think we're going to transition now to our breakout bites, our breakout sessions. And before we do, I just want to thank you, Valli, for being our guest today. That was wonderful. I really appreciate all the stories and insights you shared. And I'm sure some of the things that you shared will be very useful to people in similar positions to you at the various companies that are listening right now. Thank you again, Valli.
Thank you, Raman. See you soon.